The blood on Katherine Kane's hands wasn't hers, and that made it worse somehow, as she stood in the dusty corral of Llano, Texas, watching the wild mare thrash against the ropes that held her captive. It was July 1878, and the heat bore down like a physical weight, but Katherine felt cold watching 3 ranch hands try to break this beautiful creature with violence and noise. The mare's eyes rolled white with terror, foam flecking her dark coat, and something inside Katherine's chest cracked open like a fault line in dry earth. "Stop." The word came out quiet at first, barely audible over the shouting men and screaming horse. Then louder, with all the force of her 22 years of witnessing cruelty dressed up as necessity. "I said stop." The men turned to look at her, surprise flickering across their weathered faces. She was just the horse groomer, after all, hired 3 months ago when she'd arrived in Llano with nothing but a carpet bag and a letter of reference from a ranch in San Antonio. But something in her voice, or perhaps in her stance with her feet planted wide and her dark blonde braid falling over one shoulder like a rope of her own, made them pause. "Miss Kane, we're just doing what Mr. Patterson hired us to do," one of them said, his voice defensive. "This mare's got to be broken if she's going to be any use. Then you're going about it all wrong." Katherine ducked between the fence rails before she could second-guess herself, moving into the corral with the panicked horse. Behind her, she heard one of the men curse, but she kept walking forward, slow and steady, her hands visible and empty at her sides. The mare backed against the far fence, nostrils flaring, every muscle taut as wire. Katherine began to hum, low in her throat, a melody her mother had sung to her before the fever took her 10 years past. She didn't approach directly, but rather angled to the side, making herself smaller, less threatening. The rope burns on the mare's neck looked angry and raw in the harsh sunlight. "Easy now," Katherine murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. I promise you that, beautiful girl. I promise." It took 20 minutes of standing there, humming and speaking soft words before the mare's breathing began to slow. Another 10 before Katherine could take a step closer without the horse flinching. The men had grown quiet, watching with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Katherine could feel sweat running down her spine, soaking through her worn cotton dress, but she didn't break her focus. When she finally stood close enough to touch the mare's neck, she moved with the same careful deliberation she'd maintained throughout. Her fingers made contact with the hot, trembling flesh, and the mare's skin twitched but didn't pull away. Katherine began to stroke in long, slow movements, feeling the tension gradually release beneath her palm. "There now," she whispered. "There now. You're safe." She didn't hear the horse approaching from behind until a deep voice said, "I'll be damned." Katherine turned her head slowly, not wanting to startle the mare, and found herself looking up at a man sitting astride a paint, gelding just outside the corral fence. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with dark brown hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water in summer. His hat was pushed back on his head, and dust covered him from his shoulders to his boots, suggesting he'd been riding hard. There was something about the way he sat his horse, easy and natural as breathing, that marked him as someone who'd spent more of his life in the saddle than out of it. "You got a problem?" Katherine asked, keeping her voice low and even for the mare's benefit. "No, madam," the man said, and there was genuine wonder in his tone. "No problem at all. I've just never seen anything like that in my life." One of the ranch hands stepped forward, clearing his throat. "This is Mr. Patterson's new foreman, Owen Fletcher. Just rode in from Fort Worth yesterday." Owen dismounted in one fluid motion, looping his reins over the fence rail. He moved to stand at the corral fence, his attention fixed on Katherine and the mare. She was still stroking the horse's neck, working her way toward the rope burns with gentle fingers. "These need to be treated," Katherine said, not looking away from the mare. "And she needs water. When's the last time any of you offered her water?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Katherine felt anger kindle in her chest, hot and righteous, but she kept it from her voice when she spoke again. "Someone bring a bucket, and I'll need clean rags, salve if we have any. I'll get them." Owen's voice came quickly, decisive. She heard his boots on hard, packed earth, moving away toward the barn. By the time he returned with the supplies she'd requested, Katherine had removed the ropes from the mare's neck with slow, careful movements. The horse was still wary, but no longer panicked, her head lowered as Katherine continued her steady stream of gentle touches and soft words. Owen climbed into the corral, and Katherine tensed, ready to warn him to be careful, but he moved with the same quiet deliberation she'd shown. He set the bucket down within Katherine's reach and backed away, giving the mare space. "She'll need time," Katherine said, dipping a rag into the water and carefully cleaning the rope burns. The mare flinched but held steady. "You can't break a horse like this with force. All you do is break their spirit, and then what good are they? Just a hollow thing going through motions out of fear." "Is that what you do?" Owen asked. He'd settled himself on the top rail of the fence, watching with those creek water eyes. "Gentle them instead of breaking them." "I don't do anything to them," Katherine replied, applying salve to the cleaned wounds with delicate touches. "I work with them. There's a difference. A horse that trusts you will give you everything. A horse that fears you will only ever give you what you force from them. Where'd you learn that?" "My father." The words came out before Katherine could stop them, carrying with them a weight of memory and loss. "He had a way with horses. People said he could talk to them, but it wasn't like that. He just understood that they're not so different from us. They want to feel safe. They want to be treated with respect." Owen was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed, gone softer somehow. "Your father's still working with horses. He's dead. 3 years now. I'm sorry." Katherine shrugged, finishing with the salve and running her hand along the mare's neck one more time. The horse leaned into her touch ever so slightly, and Katherine felt a familiar satisfaction bloom in her chest. This was what she was good at, maybe the only thing. Seeing these beautiful creatures and understanding them in a way that seemed to elude most people. "She'll need time to trust again," Katherine said, stepping back slowly. The mare watched her but didn't panic. "Whoever works with her needs to be patient, gentle. No more ropes, no more forcing." "Think you could do it?" Owen asked. Katherine turned to look at him fully for the first time. He had a strong face, she noticed, with lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun and a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. There was something earnest in his expression, something that suggested he genuinely wanted to know her answer. "Mr. Patterson hired me to groom the horses, not train them. I'm the foreman now," Owen said, "and I'm asking if you could do it. If you could gentle this mare the way you just did, but see it through to riding." Katherine considered, weighing the offer against the risk. She'd been training horses since she was old enough to reach their shoulders, working alongside her father until his heart gave out in a corral much like this one. After he died, she'd kept working, but found that most ranchers wanted their horses broken fast and hard, efficiency over empathy. She'd lost more than one position for arguing, for trying to do things her way. "I could," she said finally, "but I do it my way start to finish. No interference, no one coming in to speed things up." Owen nodded slowly. "Your way." "I'll make sure Mr. Patterson understands that's how it's going to be." "Why?" The question escaped before Katherine could censor it. "You don't know me. You don't know if I can actually deliver what I'm promising." I know what I just saw, Owen replied. He swung down from the fence, landing light on his feet for a man his size. I've been working with horses since I was 12 years old, and I've never seen anyone move the way you do with them. Like you're speaking a language the rest of us forgot a long time ago. He walked toward the corral gate, pausing with his hand on the latch. Besides, that mare was about 5 minutes from breaking her own neck fighting those ropes. You saved her life just now. Least I can do is give you the chance to give her a better one. Katherine found herself without words, a rare occurrence. She watched Owen leave the corral, stopping to speak quietly with the ranch hands who'd been attempting the breaking. Whatever he said sent them walking back toward the barn, shoulders hunched. Then Owen himself headed toward the main house, presumably to speak with Mr. Patterson. The mare nickered softly, and Katherine turned her attention back to the horse. Looks like it's you and me, beautiful girl. We're going to show them all how it's supposed to be done. The sun was setting by the time Katherine finished settling the mare in a box stall, separate from the other horses where she could have peace and quiet. She'd brought fresh hay and water, spending extra time just sitting on an overturned bucket in the corner, letting the mare get used to her presence. The horse had gradually relaxed, eventually dropping her head to eat, which Katherine took as a good sign. When she finally emerged from the barn, the sky had gone purple and gold, that particular shade of Texas twilight that had always made her heart ache with its beauty. She found Owen waiting outside, leaning against the fence with his arms crossed over his chest. Mr. Patterson agreed, he said without preamble. You'll get extra pay for the training work, and the mare's yours to work with exclusively. He wants her ready to sell in 3 months. 3 months. It was tight but doable, assuming the mare didn't have deeper trauma than what she'd already shown. Katherine nodded, tucking a strand of hair that had escaped her braid behind her ear. I'll have her ready. I don't doubt it. Owen pushed off from the fence, and for a moment Katherine thought he was going to leave, but instead he seemed to gather himself for something. Miss Kane, I was wondering if you might let me watch sometimes, when you're working with the mare. I'd like to learn your methods. Katherine studied him in the fading light, trying to gauge his sincerity. She'd had plenty of men claim they wanted to learn from her, only to spend the whole time explaining how she ought to be doing things differently. But there was something in Owen's face, an openness, that made her want to give him the benefit of the doubt. You can watch, she said, but you follow my rules. You stay quiet unless I ask you a question. You don't interfere. And if I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments. Fair enough. Owen extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Katherine shook it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but not crushing. Thank you, Miss Kane. Katherine, she heard herself say. If you're going to be watching me work every day, you might as well call me Katherine. A smile crossed his face, the first real one she'd seen from him. It changed his whole appearance, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. Then you ought to call me Owen. She found herself smiling back before she could stop herself. All right then, Owen. We start at dawn. Don't be late. That first week set a pattern that would hold through the long summer days that followed. Katherine would arrive at the barn as the sun was just breaking over the eastern horizon, the air still holding a hint of coolness that would burn away within the hour. She'd spend time with each of the horses in her care, grooming them with the same tenderness and attention she gave to the mare, but it was clear where her heart lay. She'd named the mare Juniper, after the twisted trees that dotted the landscape around Lano. The mare was still skittish, but growing calmer day by day under Katherine's patient care. Katherine would sit in the stall, sometimes for an hour or more, just being present while Juniper ate or rested. She talked to the horse in that low, gentle voice, telling her stories about growing up on her father's small ranch, about the horses she'd known and loved, about the dreams she'd had before life had worn most of them away. And Owen watched, true to his word. He'd appear each morning just after dawn, settling himself on the fence or on a bale of hay outside Juniper's stall, and he'd stay quiet, his attention fixed on Catherine's every movement. At first, his presence had made her self-conscious, aware of being observed in a way she wasn't used to. But as the days passed, she found herself growing comfortable with his silent company, even beginning to enjoy it. He was a quick study. When Katherine finally invited him into Juniper's stall, showing him how to approach the mare without triggering her fear, he mimicked her movements exactly. His hands were gentle despite their size, his voice low and soothing as he followed Catherine's instructions. Juniper responded well to him, better than Katherine had expected, and she found herself reassessing her initial judgment of him as just another cowboy who thought he knew better than everyone else. "You have good instincts," she told him one morning, watching as he successfully touched Juniper's flank without the mare dancing away. "A lot of people can learn the movements, but they never quite get the feeling right. It has to come from genuine respect, not just going through motions." Owen ducked his head, looking almost bashful. "I grew up thinking the only way to work with horses was how my father taught me. Fast and firm, get them broke to saddle in a matter of days. But watching you, I realize we were probably doing it all wrong. Creating obedient horses instead of willing partners." "Not everyone sees it that way," Katherine said quietly. She was braiding wildflowers into Juniper's mane, something she did to help the mare associate human touch with pleasant experiences. "Most ranchers just want a horse they can ride from point A to point B. They don't care about partnership. Maybe that's because they've never seen what it looks like." Owen moved to stand beside Katherine, careful to keep his movements slow and predictable for Juniper's benefit. "The way you move with these horses, it's like a dance. Like you're both listening to the same music the rest of us can't hear." Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment. She focused on Juniper's mane, weaving another stem through the dark strands. "My father used to say that too. He said, I was born understanding something most people have to work their whole lives to learn if they ever learn it at all. You must miss him. Every day." The admission came easier than she'd expected. There was something about Owen's presence that invited confidence, a quality of deep listening that made her feel heard in a way she rarely experienced. "He was the only family I had after my mother passed. When he died, I felt like I'd lost my anchor. Like I was just drifting, no solid ground beneath me." Owen was quiet for a moment, his hand resting gently on Juniper's neck. The mare's eyes were half-closed, content. "Is that why you came to Lano, looking for solid ground?" "I came to Lano because I'd worn out my welcome in San Antonio," Katherine said, the words carrying a bitter edge. "The foreman there didn't appreciate me questioning his methods. When I refused to break a 3-year-old stallion using ropes and whips, he gave me a choice. Do it his way or find work elsewhere. So you found work elsewhere. I found work elsewhere." Katherine finished the last braid, running her hand along Juniper's neck in a gesture that had become automatic. "I've been drifting for a while now. Texas is full of ranches that need horse handlers, but finding ones that will let me work my own way, that's harder." "Well," Owen said, and there was something in his voice that made Katherine turn to look at him. "I hope you'll stay in Lano for a good long while. We could use someone with your talents here." The way he said it, the weight behind the words, made Katherine wonder if he was talking about more than just her work with horses. But before she could examine the thought too closely, one of the other ranch hands called for Owen, something about a fence line that needed mending, and the moment passed. The summer rolled forward, days blending into weeks. Juniper progressed beautifully under Katherine's care, transforming from a terrified, aggressive creature into a horse that would walk calmly on a lead line, that would accept a blanket across her back, that would eat treats from Katherine's palm with gentle lips. Mr. Patterson came by regularly to check on the progress, and each time he left looking satisfied, which meant Katherine's position was secure. But it wasn't just Juniper that was changing. Something was shifting between Katherine and Owen, subtle as the gradual cooling that would eventually signal autumn's approach. He still came every morning to watch her work, but now they'd talk, conversations ranging from horse training to life stories to dreams for the future. Katherine learned that Owen had grown up on a ranch in Fort Worth, that he'd lost his mother to cholera when he was 15, that his father had remarried quickly to a woman who made it clear Owen wasn't welcome in her new household. "That's when I started working other ranches," Owen told her one morning while they watched Juniper roll in the dirt of her paddock, a sign of a happy, comfortable horse. "Figured if I wasn't wanted at home, I'd make my own way. I was good with horses and cattle, could handle a rope and ride hard, so finding work wasn't difficult. But I never stayed anywhere too long. Always felt like I was still drifting, same as you described." "And now," Katherine asked, "Leno feel any different?" Owen turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it feels different." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Katherine couldn't quite name. Then Juniper climbed to her feet and shook herself vigorously, sending up a cloud of dust, and both Katherine and Owen laughed, the tension breaking. "I should get her ready for ground work," Katherine said, climbing down from the fence. "Wanna help?" "Always," Owen replied, following her into the paddock. They worked together that morning and many mornings after, falling into an easy rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Owen had fully absorbed Katherine's methods, moving with the same careful deliberation, the same respect for the horse's boundaries. Juniper responded to him nearly as well as she did to Katherine, which was the highest compliment Katherine could think of. But it wasn't just during working hours that Katherine found herself in Owen's company. He'd started appearing at the boarding house where she rented a small room, asking if she'd like to take a walk through town after supper. At first, Katherine had been hesitant, aware of how such things would look to the other residents and ranch workers. A single woman spending time alone with a man, even in public, invited gossip and speculation. But Owen had been persuasive in his quiet way, pointing out that Leno's Main Street was hardly private, and that Katherine worked too hard to not take some time for herself. So she'd agreed, and found herself enjoying those evening walks more than she wanted to admit. Owen would tell her stories about his travels across Texas, about the different ranches he'd worked and the characters he'd encountered. Katherine would counter with her own stories, and they'd laugh together as the sun set and the first stars appeared overhead. It was on one of those walks, about 6 weeks into her time working with Juniper, that Owen said something that would change everything. They'd paused at the edge of town, looking out over the rolling landscape that stretched toward the horizon. The grass had gone golden with summer heat, and the air smelled of dust and sage. Katherine was conscious of Owen standing close beside her, near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "Can I tell you something?" Owen asked, his voice carrying a note of nervousness Katherine had never heard from him before. "Of course." "I've been watching you with Juniper," he began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "No, that's not quite right. I've been watching you, Katherine. The way you are with the horses, so tender and patient, even when they're difficult. So gentle, Like you understand that they've been hurt and need someone to show them the world doesn't have to be harsh. Katherine turned to look at him, her heart suddenly beating faster. Owen met her eyes, and in the fading light, his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen from him. I find myself thinking that I'd like someone to gentle me like that too, to be patient with my rough edges, to teach me how to be better than I was raised to be. To show me that there's a different way than what I've known. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Katherine felt something unfurl in her chest, tender and terrifying all at once. "Owen," she said, but didn't know how to continue. Her experience with men was limited to working relationships, and the unwanted attention she'd learned to deflect with sharp words and averted eyes. She'd never had someone look at her the way Owen was looking at her now, like she was something precious and a little bit miraculous. "I'm not saying it right," Owen continued, a rueful smile crossing his face. "I'm better with horses than words, I guess. What I'm trying to say is that somewhere between watching you work and walking with you in the evenings, I've gone and fallen in love with you, Katherine Kane. And I know that might be too fast, or maybe you don't feel the same way, but I had to tell you. Couldn't keep carrying it around inside without speaking it out loud." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. Love. He'd said love, just put it out there plain and simple like it was a fact as basic as the sun rising. And the remarkable thing was that hearing him say it, she realized she felt the same way. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, Owen Fletcher had become essential to her days. She looked forward to seeing him each morning, felt more complete with him beside her, found herself thinking of him during the quiet hours of the night. "It's not too fast," she heard herself say. "And I do feel the same way. I didn't realize it until just now, until you said it out loud, but I love you too, Owen." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, warm and brilliant. He reached for her hand and she let him take it, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, ever respectful, always asking permission. "Yes," Katherine whispered. "Yes, you can." He leaned down and she rose on her toes to meet him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them learning this new language together. When they pulled apart, Katherine was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Well," she said, a little breathless. "That was nice." Owen laughed, the sound full of joy. "Just nice. All right, it was better than nice, it was wonderful." He kissed her again, longer this time, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek with such tenderness that Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she'd been missing, she realized. Not just love, but this kind of love. The kind that was patient and kind and built on mutual respect. The kind that felt like partnership rather than possession. When they finally walked back to town, hand in hand, Katherine felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Everything looked the same but felt fundamentally different, colored by this new understanding between them. The next weeks passed in a haze of happiness Katherine had never experienced before. She and Owen were careful to be appropriate in public, but in the quiet moments they could steal in the barn or on their evening walks, they were building something real. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Katherine discovered that Owen wanted to have his own ranch someday, a place where he could implement the gentler training methods she'd taught him. Owen learned that Katherine had always dreamed of having a stable full of rescue horses, creatures others had given up on that she could rehabilitate and find good homes for. "We could do that together," Owen said one evening as they sat in Juniper's stall, the mare dozing peacefully in the corner. "Start our own ranch, train horses the right way, build something that matters." "You'd want that?" Katherine asked, leaning against his shoulder. "To work with me long term?" "Katherine, I want everything with you long term." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. I know we haven't been courting long by traditional standards, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're what I've been looking for without knowing I was looking. You make me want to be better, gentler, more patient. You make me believe I can be the kind of man who deserves you. You already are that man, Katherine said softly. You were before you ever met me. I just helped you see it. Then see this, Owen said, and to Katherine's shock he shifted to kneel in front of her, pulling a small box from his pocket. I bought this in town last week. Been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment, but I realize every moment with you is the right moment. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond chip set in it. Nothing fancy or expensive, but to Katherine, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Katherine Kane, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life learning from you, loving you, building a future together? Tears were streaming down Katherine's face now, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. Yes, she said, her voice breaking on the word. Yes, Owen, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Then he was pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that took her breath away, and Katherine surrendered to it, to him, to this beautiful new future opening up before them. They were married 6 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Leno. Mr. Patterson gave Katherine away, and several of the ranch hands attended, along with the other residents of Katherine's boarding house. It wasn't a large gathering, but it was filled with genuine affection, and that was what mattered to Katherine. She wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair that Owen had picked that morning. He wore his best suit, hair freshly cut, and when he looked at her walking down the aisle, his eyes shone with tears. The Reverend spoke about love and partnership, about two people coming together to build a life, and Katherine felt the truth of those words settle into her bones. When Owen slipped a matching gold band on her finger, joining the engagement ring, she felt complete in a way she never had before. I love you, Owen whispered as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. I love you too, Katherine whispered back. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful, with music and dancing in the churchyard. Katherine danced with Owen, his arms strong and sure around her waist, and felt like she was floating. This was real. This was happening. She was married to a man who loved her, who respected her, who saw her as an equal partner. It felt like a miracle. That night, in the small house Owen had rented for them just outside of town, they came together as husband and wife. Owen was gentle, always checking to make sure she was comfortable, that she wanted what he was offering. Katherine had been nervous, this intimacy being entirely new to her, but Owen's patience and obvious love made it beautiful rather than frightening. They learned each other's bodies the same way they'd learned to work together with horses, with communication and care and tenderness. Afterward, lying in Owen's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Katherine felt peace settle over her like a blanket. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Owen's hand was stroking through her hair, the gesture absent and affectionate, for seeing me, for loving me, for being exactly who you are. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I should be thanking you for the same things. You changed my life, Katherine, made me see there was a better way to move through the world. We changed each other, Katherine said. That's what love does, I think. It makes us better versions of ourselves. The next morning, they returned to the ranch together, and Katherine went straight to check on Juniper. The mare was nearly finished with her training, responding beautifully to voice commands and accepting both saddle and bridle with no fuss. Katherine had been riding her for the past 2 weeks, first in the paddock and then out on short trail rides, and Juniper had been perfect. Mr. Patterson had already found a buyer, a wealthy rancher from Austin who was looking for a gentle horse for his teenage daughter. Katherine had mixed feelings about selling Juniper, had grown attached to the mare over the past 3 months, but she knew she'd done her job. Juniper was ready for a new home, ready to be someone's beloved companion. That was the goal, after all. Not to keep the horses for herself, but to prepare them for good lives elsewhere. But saying goodbye was still hard. On Juniper's last day at the ranch, Katherine spent extra time in her stall, grooming her carefully and braiding her mane with wildflowers one final time. "You're going to be so loved," Katherine told the mare, fighting back tears. "She's going to treat you right, give you everything you deserve, and you're going to be wonderful for her, I know you will." Owen appeared in the stall doorway, watching quietly. When Katherine finally emerged, eyes red from crying, he pulled her into his arms without a word, just holding her while she grieved this small loss. "I know it's silly," Katherine said against his chest. "She's just a horse, and I barely had her for 3 months." "It's not silly," Owen replied firmly. "You poured your heart into her, you saved her life and gave her a future. Of course it hurts to let her go." They stood like that for a long moment until Katherine felt steady enough to pull back. "I'm all right," she said. "This is part of the job." "I knew that going in." The rancher from Austin arrived that afternoon with a horse trailer, and his daughter was with him. She was about 16, with her father's dark coloring and a nervous excitement that reminded Katherine of herself at that age. The girl approached Juniper carefully, using the techniques Katherine showed her, and within minutes the mare was nuzzling her pockets looking for treats. "She's perfect," the girl breathed, looking up at her father with shining eyes. "Papa, she's absolutely perfect." Watching them together, Katherine felt the pain in her chest ease slightly. This was right. Juniper was going to a good home, was going to be cherished. That was what mattered. After they left, Mr. Patterson approached Katherine and Owen where they stood watching the trailer disappear down the road. "Fine work, Mrs. Fletcher," he said, using Katherine's married name for the first time. "Best training job I've ever seen. I've already had 3 other ranchers ask about your services. Seems word has spread about what you did with that mare." Katherine exchanged a glance with Owen. They'd been talking about their future, about the dream of having their own place, but the timing had never seemed quite right to bring it up with Mr. Patterson. Owen seemed to read her thoughts. He squeezed her hand once, then turned to face Mr. Patterson squarely. "Sir, Katherine and I have been discussing starting our own operation, a training facility focused on gentling methods. We'd like to give you fair notice that we'll be leaving the ranch in the next few months." Katherine held her breath, waiting for Mr. Patterson's reaction. The older man was known for his temper, and she half expected an explosion. But instead, Mr. Patterson nodded slowly, stroking his mustache. "Can't say I'm surprised. You're both too talented to stay working for someone else indefinitely. Have you found land yet?" "Not yet," Owen admitted. "We're still in the early stages of planning. There's a property about 10 miles north of here," Mr. Patterson said. "Belonged to old Tom Webster before he passed last spring. His widow's been trying to sell, but it's been sitting empty. Good land, decent barn, small house. Might be worth looking into." Katherine felt hope flare in her chest. "Thank you, sir. We'll definitely look into it. You do that." Mr. Patterson tipped his hat to them. "And when you get your operation up and running, you send any overflow work my way. I could use a reliable trainer I can recommend to clients." After he walked away, Katherine turned to Owen with wide eyes. "Did that just happen? Did Mr. Patterson just help us plan to leave him?" Owen was grinning. "Seems he did. He's a better man than I gave him credit for." That evening, they rode out to see the Webster property. It was exactly as Mr. Patterson had described, with about 50 acres of good grazing land, a barn that needed some repairs but was structurally sound, and a small two-bedroom house that was weathered but solid. Katherine walked the property with Owen, her mind already filling with possibilities. "We could fix up the barn first," she said, gesturing excitedly. "Get it ready to house horses, and we'd need to build some paddocks, different sizes for different training stages. The house can wait, we can make do with what's here for now. We could put a sign at the end of the drive," Owen added, catching her enthusiasm. "Fletcher Horse Training. Or would you want to keep your family name too, Fletcher and Kane?" Katherine considered. "I like Katherine Fletcher now, but using both names for the business honors both our families. Fletcher and Kane Horse Training. It has a nice ring to it." They spent hours walking the property, planning and dreaming until the sun set and the first stars appeared. Standing on what would be their land, looking at what would be their barn, Katherine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. "We're really doing this," she said, turning to Owen. "Building something of our own. We are." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "Scared, terrified," Katherine admitted, "but excited too. This is everything I've wanted, Owen. A place where I can work with horses my way, where I can take the ones nobody else wants and show them they are worthy of love. And doing it with you makes it perfect." "We'll make it work," Owen said with quiet confidence. "Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together." The negotiations with Mrs. Webster took a few weeks, but eventually they reached an agreement. Between Owen's savings from his years of ranch work and the money Katherine had managed to put aside, they had enough for a down payment. Mrs. Webster agreed to hold a mortgage for the balance, payments to be made quarterly. It was more debt than either of them had ever carried, but it felt like good debt, an investment in their future. They moved into the house in late September, when the brutal Texas heat was finally beginning to break. The nights were cool now, almost comfortable, and the grass was starting to green up from the autumn rains. Katherine threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains and arranging the modest furniture they'd accumulated. Owen focused on the barn, spending long days repairing stalls and reinforcing fences. They worked together in the evenings, talking about their plans and dreaming out loud. Katherine wanted to start small, maybe 3 or 4 horses at a time, focusing on quality over quantity. Owen thought they should also offer boarding services for people who wanted their horses kept somewhere with expert care. They debated, compromised, refined their plans until they had something that felt solid. Their first client came in October, a rancher from Burnett County who'd heard about Katherine's work with Juniper. He had a 5-year-old gelding that had been abused by a previous owner and was now too aggressive to handle safely. He'd been planning to put the horse down but decided to give Katherine one last chance. "If you can't gentle him, nobody can," the rancher said as he unloaded the gelding. "But I'm warning you, he's dangerous. Sent 2 men to the doctor already." Katherine studied the gelding, noting the way he held himself, the whites of his eyes showing, the tension in every muscle. This was a horse that expected pain, that had learned to attack first in self-defense. It broke her heart. "What's his name?" she asked. "We've been calling him Devil on account of his temperament." Katherine shook her head. "He needs a new name, a fresh start. I'll call him Phoenix, because that's what he's going to be, something beautiful rising from the ashes of what came before." She spent the first week doing nothing but sitting near Phoenix's stall, letting him get used to her presence. She'd read to him sometimes, her voice a constant soothing presence. Other times she'd just sit in silence, being a peaceful presence in his world. Owen would join her when his other work was done, and they'd sit together, not touching Phoenix but letting him see that they weren't threats. Phoenix watched them warily at first, but gradually, day by day, Katherine could see him start to relax. By the end of the second week, he was eating with them present. By the end of the third, he'd take treats from Katherine's hand, though he'd still dance away if she moved too quickly. "You have the patience of a saint," Owen told her one evening as they walked back to the house after a long day. "Not a saint," Katherine replied. "I just understand what it's like to be hurt and need time to trust again." Owen was quiet for a moment. "Were you hurt, Katherine? Before you came to Lano?" Katherine considered how much to share. They'd been married for 3 months now, building a life together, but there were still parts of herself she kept protected. But Owen had been nothing but honest with her, nothing but trustworthy. He deserved the same in return. "Not the way you might think," she said slowly. "No man ever harmed me physically. But I spent a lot of years being told my way of doing things was wrong, being dismissed, talked over, pushed aside, being told I was too soft, too emotional, that I let my feelings for the horses cloud my judgment. After a while, that kind of thing wears on you. Makes you question yourself." Owen reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I'm sorry that happened to you, but for what it's worth, everything they said was wrong. Your compassion isn't a weakness. It's your greatest strength." Katherine squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for seeing that, for seeing me." "Always," Owen promised. Phoenix continued to improve, and by the end of 2 months, Katherine was able to handle him safely. She could groom him, lead him, even put a halter on without him panicking. It was slow progress, much slower than the rancher had probably hoped for, but it was real progress. The horse that had been labeled dangerous and unsalvageable was learning to trust again. The rancher came to check on Phoenix in December, and Katherine could see the skepticism on his face as he approached. But when he saw Phoenix standing calmly while Katherine brushed him, saw the way the horse's ears pricked forward at her voice rather than pinning back in aggression, his expression changed to wonder. "I'll be damned," he breathed. "That's the same horse." "Same horse," Katherine confirmed. "Just treated with the respect he deserves. He's not fully trained yet. We probably have another month or 2 of work. But he's not dangerous anymore. He never really was. He was just scared." The rancher shook his head slowly. "My men said it couldn't be done. Said I was wasting my money sending him here. Glad I didn't listen." Word of Phoenix's transformation spread, and by the time the new year rolled around, Katherine and Owen had a waiting list of clients. Some wanted difficult horses gentled. Others wanted young horses started properly from the beginning. Still others just wanted a place where they knew their animals would be treated well. The boarding side of the business picked up too, and soon they were housing 10 horses with plans to expand the barn to accommodate more. Katherine had never been happier. Every day brought new challenges, but she faced them with Owen by her side, and that made all the difference. They'd fall into bed exhausted each night, muscles aching from physical labor, but they'd also fall asleep wrapped in each other's arms, content in the life they were building. It was in February, during a rare rainy week that kept them inside more than usual, that Katherine realized she hadn't had her monthly courses in a while. She sat at the kitchen table, counting back weeks, and felt her heart start to race with the realization. She was late, very late. Owen found her sitting there, staring at the calendar, and immediately knew something was wrong. "Katherine, what is it?" She looked up at him, hardly daring to speak the words aloud. "I think I might be with child." Owen went very still. Then a smile spread across his face, slow and wondering. "Really? You're sure?" "Not completely sure," Katherine admitted. "I'd need to see the doctor to know for certain. But Owen, I'm 6 weeks late, and I'm never late." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her up into his arms and spinning her around. Katherine laughed, clutching at his shoulders, and when he set her down, he was grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. "We're going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Katherine, we're going to have a baby." "Maybe," she cautioned, but she couldn't stop smiling. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." But the doctor confirmed it the following week. Katherine was indeed pregnant, about 7 weeks along, due sometime in early October. The doctor cautioned her to take it easy, to not overwork herself, but also said that moderate physical activity was fine as long as she felt up to it. Owen became absurdly protective, trying to prevent Katherine from doing any heavy lifting or strenuous work. Katherine found it endearing but also slightly frustrating. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from carrying a saddle. "Women have been having babies and working through pregnancy since the beginning of time." "I know," Owen said, looking sheepish. "I just want to take care of you, make sure nothing happens to either of you." Katherine's expression softened. She set down the saddle and went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I know you do, and I love you for it. But you have to trust me to know my own limits. I'll be careful, I promise. But I'm not going to stop working entirely." They compromised, with Katherine focusing more on the detailed work that didn't require heavy lifting, while Owen took on the more physically demanding tasks. It actually worked out well, as it freed Katherine to spend more time on the actual training, which was her strength anyway. As her pregnancy progressed, and her belly began to swell with their child, Katherine found herself thinking about the future in new ways. What kind of mother would she be? Would she be able to balance running the business with raising a child? Would their child inherit her gift with horses, or would they be interested in entirely different things? Owen was a steady presence through all her worries, assuring her that they'd figure it out together, that she was going to be an amazing mother, that their child was lucky to have her. His confidence helped steady Katherine's nerves. The summer heat was brutal that year, and Katherine felt every degree of it as her pregnancy advanced. By August, she was large and uncomfortable, her ankles swollen and her back aching constantly. Owen insisted she take afternoon rests in the house, out of the sun, and Katherine didn't argue. She was tired in a way she'd never experienced before, a bone-deep exhaustion that came from creating a whole new person inside her body. But she was also happier than she'd ever been. The business was thriving, they had more work than they could handle, and they'd hired 2 young ranch hands to help with the daily tasks. Their little house was being prepared for the baby, with Owen building a cradle in the evenings and Katherine sewing tiny clothes. Everything was coming together. Phoenix had long since returned to his owner, a different horse than the one who'd arrived, and Katherine had successfully trained 6 more horses since then. Each one was a success story, each one proof that her methods worked, that gentleness and patience could accomplish what force and fear never could. As September arrived and Katherine's due date approached, she found herself growing anxious. Her mother had died when she was 12, so she had no female family to guide her through this. The doctor had explained what to expect, but book knowledge wasn't the same as lived experience. Still, Owen was there, solid and supportive, promising to stay by her side through the entire ordeal. The labor started on a cool October morning, just as the sun was rising. Katherine woke to cramping pains and immediately knew this was it. She woke Owen, and he jumped into action, riding into town to fetch the doctor and the midwife while Katherine tried to breathe through the increasingly intense contractions. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the entire day and into the evening. Owen stayed with Katherine the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement even when she screamed at him that this was all his fault. The doctor and midwife were professional and calm, guiding Katherine through the process. Finally, as the sun was setting in brilliant oranges and purples, Katherine gave one final push and felt her baby slip free. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, and then she heard it, the thin, wavering cry of her newborn child. "It's a boy," the midwife announced, holding up the tiny, squirming infant. "A healthy baby boy." Owen was crying, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. The midwife cleaned the baby quickly and then placed him in Katherine's arms, and Katherine looked down at the tiny face and felt her entire world shift. This was her son. Hers and Owen's. This perfect, beautiful little person they'd created together. "He's perfect," she whispered, touching one tiny hand with her finger. The baby's hand immediately closed around her finger, gripping tight. "Owen, look, he's perfect. Just like his mother," Owen said, his voice thick with emotion. He leaned down to kiss Katherine's forehead, then gently touched their son's cheek. "What should we name him?" They'd discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son's face, Katherine knew. "James," she said. "After my father, James Fletcher." Owen smiled through his tears. "James Fletcher. It's perfect." The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, learning how to care for this tiny person who depended on them entirely. Katherine had never been so tired in her life, but she'd also never been so full of love. James was an easy baby, all things considered, crying only when he was hungry or needed changing, sleeping peacefully in the cradle Owen had built. The business had to slow down while Katherine recovered from the birth and adjusted to motherhood, but their two ranch hands kept things running smoothly. Owen took on more of the training work himself, using the methods Katherine had taught him, and did surprisingly well. When Katherine was finally up and moving around again, she'd watch him work with the horses, their infant son sleeping in a basket nearby, and feel overwhelming gratitude for the life they'd built. James grew quickly, as babies do. By the time spring arrived, he was sitting up on his own, his eyes following everything with bright curiosity. He seemed particularly fascinated by the horses, his little face lighting up whenever they were near the barn. Katherine would hold him while she worked, talking to both him and the horses in that same gentle voice, and James would watch everything with serious attention. "I think he's going to take after you," Owen said one afternoon, watching their son reach out to touch a horse's nose with chubby fingers. "Or maybe he'll take after both of us," Katherine replied. She guided James's hand, showing him how to touch gently, and the horse whickered softly, making James giggle. Best of both worlds. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier than before but richer too. Katherine and Owen continued to grow their business, their reputation spreading throughout Central Texas. They had clients coming from as far as Houston and Dallas, willing to travel because they'd heard about the Fletcher and Kane way of training horses. The barn expansion was completed, giving them room for 20 horses now, and they had to hire another hand to keep up with the work. On their second wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Katherine with a gift. It was a sign, beautifully carved and painted, reading Fletcher and Kane Horse Training, established 1878, where gentleness meets excellence. "I thought we could put it at the end of the drive," Owen said, looking nervous about whether Katherine would like it. "So everyone knows what we stand for." Katherine traced the letters with her fingers, tears pricking her eyes. This was real. This was theirs. A business built on treating animals with respect, a marriage built on mutual love and partnership, a family growing in love and security. "It's perfect," she told Owen, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Everything is perfect." As the months turned into years, that perfection only deepened. James grew into a bright, energetic toddler who spent his days following his parents around the ranch, already showing an instinctive gentleness with the horses. Katherine taught him the same lessons her father had taught her, about respect and patience and understanding that these animals were thinking, feeling beings deserving of kindness. When James was 3, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time she knew the signs immediately, knew what to expect. The pregnancy was easier than the first had been, perhaps because she wasn't also trying to establish a business and prove herself. Or maybe she was just more relaxed, more confident in her body's ability to do what it needed to do. Their daughter was born on a warm May evening, coming into the world much faster than James had. Owen barely had time to fetch the midwife before Katherine was delivering a squalling, red-faced baby girl. They named her Rose, after Owen's mother, and she was as different from James as night from day. Where James had been a calm baby, Rose was fierce and demanding, letting her opinions be known from day one. "She's going to keep us on our toes," the midwife said with a laugh as Rose screamed her displeasure at being cleaned. "That's all right," Katherine said, cuddling her daughter close. "I like a challenge." Rose did indeed prove to be a handful, but also a joy. She was fearless in a way that terrified Katherine sometimes, climbing before she could properly walk, charging at the horses with no sense of caution. But she also had a tender side, would cry if she saw an animal in distress, would carefully carry bugs outside rather than squishing them. She was a fascinating mix of fierce and gentle, and Katherine loved every complicated inch of her. James adored his little sister, even when she knocked over his carefully stacked blocks or pulled his hair. He'd follow her around, making sure she didn't get into too much trouble, already protective at such a young age. Watching her children together, Katherine would sometimes have to pause and just marvel at the life she'd built. The business continued to thrive. Katherine and Owen's methods had proven themselves time and again, and they'd trained dozens of horses that had been labeled as problem animals. Each success story spread their reputation further, brought more clients to their door. They'd purchased an additional 20 acres, expanding their pastures, and had built a proper training arena for the more advanced work. They'd also started teaching workshops, sharing their methods with other trainers who wanted to learn a gentler approach. Katherine would stand in front of groups of skeptical cowboys and ranchers, demonstrating with a difficult horse, and watch their expressions change from doubt to wonder as they saw what gentleness could accomplish. "You're changing the industry," Owen told her one evening after a particularly successful workshop, "making people see there's a better way." "We're changing it together," Katherine corrected. "I couldn't do any of this without you." It was true. Owen had become as skilled as Katherine at the gentle training methods, could read a horse's body language and respond appropriately, knew when to push forward and when to back off. They made an incredible team, anticipating each other's moves, supporting each other's decisions. The business was truly a partnership in every sense of the word. When James was 7 and Rose was 4, they took on their most challenging case yet. A rancher from Fredericksburg brought them a Mustang that had been captured from a wild herd. The horse was fully grown, had never been handled by humans, and was absolutely terrified of everything in this new, domesticated world. The rancher had tried to break him using traditional methods and had nearly gotten killed for his trouble. "I know it's probably impossible," the rancher said, watching the Mustang pace frantically in the temporary pen they'd set up. "But I figured if anyone could do something with him, it'd be you folks." Katherine studied the Mustang, seeing the wild panic in his eyes, the way he threw himself against the fences trying to escape. This wasn't a horse that had been mistreated by humans. This was a horse that had been free and was now imprisoned, and he didn't understand why. "I'll work with him," Katherine said, "but I can't promise anything. He's not like the other horses we've trained. He hasn't just lost trust in humans. He's never had it to begin with." It took 4 months of patient, careful work before the Mustang, who Katherine had named Freedom, would let her touch him. 4 months of sitting near his pen, talking softly, offering treats that he'd refuse, just being a consistent, non-threatening presence. Owen helped when he could, but this was primarily Katherine's project, and she poured her heart into it. James and Rose would sometimes come watch, sitting quietly as their mother worked. Katherine used those moments to teach them the same lessons she'd learned from her father, about patience and respect, and the importance of seeing animals as individuals with their own needs and feelings. "Why doesn't he want people to touch him, Mama?" Rose asked one day, watching Freedom shy away from Katherine's outstretched hand. "Because he's never learned that people can be safe," Katherine explained. "He grew up wild, free to go wherever he wanted. Now he's in a pen, and people are trying to make him do things he doesn't understand. He's scared." "But you're not scary," James said with the absolute confidence of a child. Katherine smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart, but Freedom doesn't know that yet. I have to show him day by day that I'm not going to hurt him, that I respect his boundaries. Eventually, if I'm patient enough, he might decide to trust me." "And if he doesn't?" Rose asked. "Then we let him go," Katherine said simply. "We find a place where he can run free again. Some horses aren't meant to be domesticated, and that's okay. We don't get to decide that for them." But Freedom did, eventually, decide to trust. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Katherine was sitting in her usual spot near his pen, reading aloud from a book of poetry, when Freedom walked over and gently bumped her shoulder with his nose. Katherine froze, hardly daring to breathe, and slowly lifted her hand to touch his neck. Freedom allowed it, even leaned into the touch slightly, and Katherine felt tears stream down her face. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such a good, brave boy." From there, progress came faster. Within 2 weeks, Freedom was accepting a halter. Within a month, he was following Katherine on a lead rope. By the end of the 2nd month, he'd let her put a saddle on his back, though he still wasn't ready for a rider. Katherine didn't push, just let him set the pace, and Freedom responded by continuing to trust her. When the rancher from Fredericksburg came to check on his horse, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Freedom, the same Mustang who'd been practically feral, standing calmly while Katherine groomed him, ears pricked forward in contentment. "I never thought I'd see the day," the rancher said, shaking his head in wonder. "You really are as good as people say." But when it came time to discuss Freedom returning to Fredericksburg, Katherine found herself hesitating. She'd grown attached to this horse in a way she hadn't allowed herself since Juniper. Freedom represented everything she believed in, the idea that gentleness and patience could reach even the wildest heart. "I'd like to buy him from you," Katherine heard herself say. "If you're willing to sell. I know you paid good money to have him captured and then brought here for training." The rancher considered. "He's worth a fair bit now that he's trained." "I'll pay you double what you paid for the capture," Katherine offered. It was more than they could easily afford, would set back some of their expansion plans, but she didn't care. Freedom belonged here, with her and Owen and their children. She knew it with bone-deep certainty. The rancher agreed, and Freedom became the first horse they kept for themselves rather than training for someone else. James and Rose were thrilled, immediately adopting Freedom as their special project. Under Katherine's supervision, they'd help groom him, feed him treats, talked to him in the same gentle voices they'd learned from their mother. Freedom thrived in their care, gradually transforming from a wild, frightened creature to a horse that would come when called, that seemed to genuinely enjoy human company. Katherine would sometimes ride him across their property, just the two of them, and feel a profound sense of peace. This horse had chosen to trust her, had chosen to stay, and that meant everything. As the years continued to pass, the Fletcher family and their business became institutions in Llano and the surrounding area. People would travel from across Texas to have their horses trained the Fletcher and Kane way, and Katherine and Owen trained several apprentices in their methods, people who went on to start their own gentle training operations elsewhere. James grew into a thoughtful young man who inherited his mother's gift with horses and his father's steady temperament. By the time he was 15, he was working alongside his parents as a full partner in the business, already developing a reputation as a skilled trainer in his own right. Rose took a slightly different path. She loved the horses, but she was more interested in the medical side of animal care. She apprenticed with the local veterinarian, learning how to treat injuries and illnesses, and brought those skills back to the family ranch. Having their own animal doctor on site made their operation even more attractive to potential clients. Katherine and Owen watched their children grow and thrive, watched their business continue to expand and succeed, and felt grateful every single day for the life they'd built. They'd started with nothing but a shared belief that there was a better way to work with horses, and had created something that would outlast them, a legacy of gentleness in a harsh world. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Owen took Katherine on a sunset ride, just the two of them, for the first time in months. They rode to the high point on their property, where they could see the whole ranch spread out below them, the barn and paddocks and pastures, the house where they'd raised their children, the land they'd worked and loved. "Look at what we built," Owen said, his arm around Katherine's waist as they stood watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Look at what we've done." "We did it together," Katherine replied, leaning into her husband's warmth. "Every step of the way together." "I still think about that first day," Owen said. "Watching you walk into that corral with Juniper, so brave and calm and absolutely certain in what you were doing. I fell a little bit in love with you right then, I think." Katherine smiled, remembering. "And I fell in love with you when you asked if I could gentle you too. When you admitted you wanted to be better, softer, more patient. That took courage." "You've made me better," Owen said. "Made me the man I always wanted to be but didn't know how to become." "And you've given me a home," Katherine replied. "A place where I can be fully myself, where my way of doing things is valued instead of dismissed. You've given me a family, a purpose, a life beyond anything I ever dreamed possible." They stood in silence for a while, watching the sun sink below the horizon, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. 20 years since they'd said their vows, and Katherine loved Owen more now than she had then. They'd built something beautiful together, something that mattered, and they'd raised children who would carry on that legacy. 20 more years?" Owen asked, kissing her temple. 20 more years," Katherine agreed. "And 20 after that if we're lucky." "I want to spend every day I have left with you, Owen Fletcher. Growing old together, watching our children build their own lives, maybe meeting grandchildren someday. All of it together." "All of it together," Owen echoed. "I love you, Katherine, more than words can say." "I love you too," Katherine replied. "Thank you for seeing me all those years ago, for believing in me, for asking me to gentle you too. You've given me everything." They rode back to the ranch as the stars came out in full force, a blanket of light across the dark sky. The barn glowed with warm lantern light, and Katherine could see James and Rose moving around inside, doing the evening feeding. Their children, nearly grown now but still here, still part of this life they'd built. The years that followed brought their own joys and challenges. James married at 23, a kind young woman from Austin who loved horses as much as he did. And they gave Katherine and Owen their first grandchildren, twin boys who were as wild and wonderful as could be. Rose continued her veterinary studies, eventually becoming the official veterinarian for several surrounding ranches in addition to their own. The business continued to thrive, their reputation solid, their methods proven time and again. They trained hundreds of horses over the years, each one treated with the same care and respect as the first. And they continued to teach workshops, spreading their philosophy to a new generation of trainers. Katherine's hair went gray, and Owen's face became lined with wrinkles, but they still worked side by side every day, still moved together with the same easy synchronization they'd developed all those years ago. Their love had only deepened with time, becoming something rich and comfortable and absolutely essential. When Katherine was 55, she was training a particularly difficult mare when she noticed Owen had stopped what he was doing to watch her work. She glanced over at him, raising an eyebrow in question. "Just appreciating," Owen called over. "After all these years, I still love watching you work. You're beautiful when you're with the horses, Katherine, like you're speaking a language only they can fully understand." Katherine felt herself blush, even after all these years together. "You old romantic." "Always," Owen agreed, grinning. "You're stuck with me, Mrs. Fletcher." "Best thing that ever happened to me," Katherine replied, and meant it with her whole heart. They continued working together as the sun tracked across the sky. Two people moving as one, united by love and purpose, and a shared belief that gentleness was strength, that patience was power, that respect for all living things was the foundation for a life well lived. The mare Katherine was training began to relax under her care, the same way Juniper had all those years ago, the same way hundreds of horses had in the years since. Each one was a reminder that their work mattered, that they were making a real difference in the world, one horse at a time. As the sun began to set, painting the Texas sky in brilliant colors, Katherine finished with the mare and walked over to where Owen was waiting. He took her hand automatically, and they stood together, watching the day fade into evening. "It's a good life," Katherine said quietly. "The best," Owen agreed. "And it's not over yet. We've still got years ahead of us, Katherine. More horses to train, more sunsets to watch, more days to spend together." Katherine leaned her head on her husband's shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, the warmth of his love surrounding her like a blanket. From somewhere, nearby came the sound of their grandchildren laughing, Rose calling out instructions to them about proper horse care. The barn was full of horses, all healthy and content, being treated the way every creature deserved to be treated. This was what they'd built. This was their legacy. Not just a successful business, but a whole philosophy about how to move through the world with compassion and respect. They'd proven that gentleness wasn't weakness, that patience was just as valuable as speed, that love in all its forms, for animals and for each other, was the most powerful force there was. "Come on," Katherine said, tugging Owen's hand. "Let's go see what Rose has cooked for dinner. I'm starving." They walked toward the house hand in hand, the way they'd walked through life together for more than 30 years now. Behind them, the horses settled in for the night, calm and content in the care of people who saw them, truly saw them, and treated them accordingly. Katherine glanced back once, taking in the sight of their ranch in the gathering dusk, and smiled. She'd come to Lano with nothing but a carpet bag and a desperate hope for something better. She'd found Owen, found her purpose, found a home. She'd built a life beyond her wildest dreams, and she'd done it by staying true to the lessons her father had taught her all those years ago. Treat every living thing with gentleness and respect. Meet fear with patience. Answer violence with peace. See the individual before you, whether human or animal, and honor their inherent worth and dignity. These were the principles she'd built her life on, the same principles she'd passed down to her children and their children after them. They were simple lessons, but profound in their impact. They'd shaped not just how she worked with horses, but how she moved through the world, how she loved her husband, how she raised her family. Inside the house, warm light glowed and the sound of laughter rang out. Katherine and Owen climbed the porch steps together, and Owen held the door open for her with a little bow that made her laugh. After all these years, he could still make her laugh, could still surprise her with gestures of love both grand and small. Their family was gathered around the dinner table, 3 generations now, all of them connected by bonds of love and shared purpose. James was there with his wife and twin boys, now 6 years old, and already showing signs of their grandmother's gift with animals. Rose was there with her latest medical journal, eager to share some new treatment she'd learned about. This was everything, Katherine thought as she took her seat beside Owen, his hand finding hers under the table. This was a life fully lived, rich with meaning and purpose and love. From that first moment in the corral with Juniper, when Owen had watched her work and asked to be gentled too, everything had led to this. Every challenge faced, every horse trained, every sunset watched together, all of it had built toward this beautiful, ordinary moment of family gathered for dinner. The years would continue to unfold, bringing their own joys and sorrows as all years do. But Katherine knew now what she hadn't fully understood in her younger years, that love was what made everything worthwhile. Love for the horses she trained, love for the work she did, and above all, love for Owen and the family they'd created together. She looked across the table at her husband, still handsome despite the gray in his hair and the lines on his face, and caught his eye. He smiled at her, that same warm smile that had been making her heart skip for more than 30 years, and mouthed the words, "I love you." "I love you too," Katherine mouthed back, and meant it with every fiber of her being. This was their story. A love story that had started with a woman who knew how to gentle horses and a man who'd been brave enough to ask her to gentle him too. They'd built something beautiful together, something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of compassion in a world that too often forgot the value of tenderness. And as they sat together surrounded by family, sharing a meal and stories and laughter, Katherine Fletcher née Kane felt nothing but gratitude for the wild, wonderful journey that had brought her here, to this moment, to this life, to this love that had transformed everything. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility and promise. There would be more horses to train, more lives to touch, more sunsets to watch from their favorite spot on the property. There would be grandchildren to teach and great-grandchildren to meet someday, God willing. There would be challenges and changes as there always were, but they would face them together, the way they'd faced everything else. Because that was what love meant in the end. Not the grand romantic gestures, though those had their place. But the daily choice to be gentle with each other, to be patient, to see each other truly and honor what they saw. To work side by side building something that mattered. To hold hands as the sun set and know that no matter what came, they would face it together. Katherine squeezed Owen's hand under the table, and he squeezed back, and they shared a smile that held 30 years of history, of love, of partnership. Their story had started with horses, but had become so much more. It had become a testament to what was possible when two people chose gentleness over force, patience over speed, love over fear. And it was far from over. There were still chapters to be written, still memories to be made, still days to be lived fully and with intention. But this moment was perfect in its simplicity, and Katherine allowed herself to just be here, present and grateful and overflowing with love for this life she'd built, and the man who'd built it with her. Outside, the horses settled for the night, safe and content in the knowledge that they were cared for by people who saw them, who respected them, who treated them with the gentleness they deserved. And inside, the Fletcher family continued their dinner, their laughter ringing out into the Texas night, a sound of joy and love and home. This was how the story ended, not with drama or tragedy, but with this, the quiet beauty of a life well lived, a love deeply felt, a legacy carefully built. Katherine and Owen Fletcher had proven that gentleness was strength, that patience was power, that love in all its forms could transform not just individual lives but the wider world. They'd started with a simple question, a cowboy asking to be gentled the way a woman gentled horses, and had built an entire philosophy, an entire life, around the answer. And the answer had always been love. Love expressed through patience and respect and tenderness. Love that saw the worth in every living thing and acted accordingly. That was their gift to the world, the legacy they'd leave behind. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.